Hello and welcome to Bags of Action. My name is Pete and this is a 5-minute Bags of Action review of The Gentlemen from 2019. This was written and directed by Guy Ritchie, following on from his other crime movies, Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. That's the 90s movie that gave the film world ex-model Jason Statham and ex-footballer Vinnie Jones. And it's along similar lines to that movie and also things like Snatch, Revolver and Rock and Roller. Guy Ritchie, of course, has gone on to do other sort of studio movies, things like the two Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes movies, Man from U.N.C.L.E., King Arthur Legend of the Sword, and one that surprised me, the recent Aladdin live-action remake. And it's really good for me to see him back in this action crime comedy arena where he made such an impression before. So, what is The Gentlemen about? An American expat tries to sell off his highly profitable marijuana empire in London, triggering plots, schemes, bribery and blackmail in an attempt to steal his domain out from under him. That sounds very Guy Ritchie, and this movie is. I don't think anyone else could have made this film in quite this way. It's got a stellar cast, a really strong ensemble cast, which includes people like Matthew McConaughey, Charlie Hunnam, Michelle Dockery, Jeremy Strong, Colin Farrell, Hugh Grant, Henry Golding, and also Eddie Marsan. So I've been a Guy Ritchie fan from his crime movies for a long time. Back in the day, I did a 2-day film course at Raindance in London. And it was around the time where everything was about the auteur. You had to be a writer-director. You couldn't be one or the other. People like Spike Lee and Quentin Tarantino had done this same 2-day course in New York. Now, the instructor had flown over from the US, and I think he'd seen Lock, Stock on the plane when he was coming over. And he was explaining to us about rising tension and how that works. And he said, you need to have a certain amount of oh shit moments, as he described them. But then he said that Lock, Stock kind of broke the mold because it had oh shit moment on top of oh shit moment on top of oh shit moment all the way through. And I think that's true. And I think in some ways that film was the making of Guy Ritchie because it was so strong. But in other ways, it's kind of a bit like maybe Edgar Wright. It's like, oh, you've got these kind of Ritchie-isms and maybe that's why he's done these studio films to kind of break out of that. So what happened to Guy Ritchie? He went on, he made a name for himself off the back of that movie. He married Madonna and he ended up living in the country and got a little bit gentrified. And it was interesting for me because this film moves up to the higher echelons of the drug trade rather than being at street level like Lock, Stock. And on some level, that feels to me at least like a bit of a meta-commentary on his own life and his own film career from kind of like, in trying to pull together like his first indie film to actually kind of, rubbing shoulders with the stars and, living on an estate. But putting that to one side, this is another interesting crime caper, and as expected with Ritchie, it's full of larger-than-life characters. Hugh Grant and Colin Farrell put in brilliant turns. Hugh Grant is dodgy journalist Fletcher, and there's another bit of meta-commentary there, really, because Hugh Grant himself has had a long-running battle with the UK tabloid, so I'm sure he had great fun playing the kind of sleazy journalist that had been hacking his phone. And Colin Farrell plays the boxing coach, who is called Coach, and he's great as well. But Hugh Grant is almost unrecognisable in his sleazy role. His voice is something very different, and it's a really long way from the foppish roles he made his name with. Hunnam's intensity is captivating, and it reminded me of how good an actor he really is. Henry Golding, for me, was a bit too much of a caricature. Eddie Marsan is criminally underused because I think he's a great actor. I wonder if there are more scenes with him that maybe ended up on the cutting room floor. But the biggest disappointment about The Gentlemen for me is Matthew McConaughey. He seems to be kind of sleepwalking his way through this film. Now, after his stellar turns in Wolf of Wall Street and True Detective, I expected something really special. He was one of the main draws for me. Or maybe something removed from his own kind of laconic persona, but he's probably, I wouldn't say the weakest point in this film, but he just isn't given that much to do. Now, when the action does kick in, it's brutal, effective, and often funny, which again fits the Guy Ritchie brand. There is one scene I thought overstepped the mark in a very old-fashioned and unnecessary way, but it's a Guy Ritchie movie. That's kind of what you expect. And now, if you like his other crime movies, I think you'll enjoy this one. It doesn't have that initial kind of spark and energy that Lock, Stock did, but I'm not sure that would be possible now. I did like this overall meta vibe that seemed to be woven through this kind of postmodern approach. There's a screenplay in this called Bush, written by Hugh Grant's character, which originally was the working title of this movie, and as titles go, a worthy successor to Snatch, and he pitches that to Miramax in the film. So again, it's very meta. There is some really heavy product placement, which irritated me. Guy Ritchie's beer is through the whole of this film. Although it's a very nice beer, it's in this film a lot. There's a Man from U.N.C.L.E. poster. Again, I'm hoping that was more of a meta touch than anything else. So I kind of wavered on this film. It started very slowly, and it felt a bit bogged down by how wordy it was. There's a framing device of Hugh Grant's character telling a story, which again is very Guy Ritchie. But, I think I read an article where Hugh Grant had 40 pages of dialogue to learn, and it kind of showed. You just kind of got weighed down by the fact you were being told a story when you just wanted to see what was happening more. So the first half of this movie is kind of a two-bag film, I'd say. But the second half, things changed. The action steeped up, the humour got broader, the plot line started to come together, and you saw more of Colin Farrell's character, which was great. And that made it more like a four-bag movie. So, I don't know, I just wish McConaughey had turned things up a notch or two. Then this could have been a really strong film. So, I'm going to give The Gentleman, with all that considered, I'm going to give it 3 bags of action out of 5. And it was certainly, I will continue to go back to Guy Ritchie's crime movies because I think he has a voice which no one else quite has. So, have you seen The Gentleman? Do you agree with my assessment of it? Feel free to comment below or get in touch with us via email, Facebook, or on Twitter. We have new episodes coming out weekly, and our full-length podcast with my co-host Steve coming out monthly. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Bags of Action, of course, will always be free, but if you'd like to buy us a coffee, you can do so at our Ko-fi page.